You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, your partner, and your world. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is simple: to help you navigate life with more clarity, more confidence, and purpose-driven action, with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and some loving straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Everyday Legends podcast, or welcome for the first time if this is you joining for the first time. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and I'm pumped today to bring you this interview, this conversation with Tim Noonan. Tim is a fascinating dude, and I first came across him a few years ago when I watched his TV show, Boy to Man. And we cover that a bit in this podcast. The gist of it, to give you the overview, is Tim went on an epic 12-part quest to discover what it means to become a man. So a 12-part documentary series where each episode he travels to a totally different kind of remote, native culture and experiences their coming of age, rite of passage, rituals and initiations. We're talking Brazil, Cameroon, Papua New Guinea, Madagascar, Mongolia, all sorts of crazy adventures. I remember the first episode when my wife and I saw it. He all of a sudden ends up in the middle of Siberia. It's crazy what goes on, but in that one and all of them. And so Tim and I in this episode explore a lot of that, a lot of the idea around rites of passage and initiation, and you know what happened for him, his processes, what he learnt, what shifted in him, but also what he witnessed in the other young men going through it. He was a lot older than all of the young men going through these in the tribes and villages. And what he saw and felt and was part of in the community as well. Something for me, I believe, to be so important for raising healthy, mature men is a community and an initiation, a rite of passage, some process, a coming of age ritual, initiating men into an initiated society. When that happens, man, we have a different society, and it's something we lack now. And I think a lot of the problems that we see in the world stem from uninitiated men in uninitiated communities. So Tim and I dive into this. There's so much in this, and man, you got to go watch the show, by the way, his show, Boy to Man, if you can find it somewhere. But in this episode, we also touch on his next series, which is called Extreme Engagement, where his quest and thirst for adventure and testing his limits, really, saw his fiance and him travel to, you guessed it, some remote parts of the world and remote communities and cultures, and go through almost a similar type thing where they test the relationship to see if you, not only I suppose see if you guys are going to last, but to give you the test so you have what it takes to be a couple and be a couple in the community. Anyway, some fascinating stuff in that show as well as what we cover in this one. So dive in. There's so much amazing stuff in Tim in this episode and what he's produced as well. And with that, I want to touch on something that I have for the men listening in regards to your relationship, and that is my 4-week accelerator course in relationships for men, the Better Partner Project. That is a do at home, and it's 4 weeks, but it essentially is do at your own pace, comprehensive course to help you not only understand relationships, but to understand yourself. Being a better partner is not so much initially about how you show up and what you do with your partner. First of all, it starts with you. So actually, the work on relationships is first about this relationship with yourself. That's where we start, so that you can show up as the man you want to be and can be. You don't have to be in a relationship right now, Not at all. You will learn so much about yourself and relationships, about men and women and the masculine and feminine, understanding why we do certain things in relationships, why we do certain things in conflict, how we navigate conflict skillfully through connection. Instead of avoiding conflict, we actually turn it into a moment of connection. So that's all the stuff that you get in that. It's such a beautiful course to dive into this work by yourself. Plus, every now and then I run live Q&A, so you can jump on and ask me all of your questions and in-depth questions. A great way to, if this episode it creates an itch around you in relationships, if you want to scratch it. Otherwise, as always, where you find your podcast episode, like, subscribe, give us a rating and a review, all those things. And now, into the show. Tim Noonan, welcome to the Everyday Legends podcast.
Thanks, Mike.
Great to have you here. Now, mate, I know you. I first came across you via one of your TV shows, and I suspect some of my audience perhaps might as well. But where I want to start is to give you a bit of an opportunity to introduce yourself. And this is an open question. You can take it wherever you want. And that question is this, mate, who is Tim Noonan?
Well, that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I'll get back to you when I've worked it out.
Your current best idea of that?
Well, I guess in a nutshell, I guess I consider myself to be an extreme filmmaker that loves to go into the wild and test my limits and experience the full rapture of what it means to be alive. And in a way, I'm addicted to any journey of self-discovery. So that's what my TV shows are about. Mm-hmm. It's what I like to make films about, because ultimately I feel like if we're not growing, then why are we here? And so what I'm attracted to most is to almost setting out to put myself through the most extreme experience I possibly can, so I have the greatest growth that I possibly can. So it sounds like I'm just, it could sound like I'm just trying to do crazy stunts. So for the last, 10 years, I've literally just got out a map and I've read a ton, and I've found the most insane rituals, the most challenging and bizarre and spectacular rites of passage around the world, and found a way to go there, introduce myself, often with ancient societies and tribal people, and see if they'll, let me into their world and take me along for the ride and see if I can test myself up against how they live. Part of my addiction to ancient ways of life and their rituals and customs is because maybe I'm just like a romantic at heart or something. Like I love that old-fashioned adventure, but I also feel like we're at this pivotal time on Earth where, maybe even for the next decade or 20 years, we're losing so many rites of passage and customs and ways of living that have existed and evolved over tens of thousands of years sometimes, and we're at this critical point where they're about to be lost. And as soon as I knew that, I was like, oh my God, I need to get out there and experience this for myself. So I've got that information to move forward. And of course, like some of it's not applicable today, but a lot of it is. And I know that you're all about manhood and rites of passage and, what is a man these days. And I guess that's an evolving book for me. It's an ever-changing thing. Yeah. So, I should let you throw it away. Because I don't have to just keep talking.
Well, it is an ever-changing book, and I think that's part of the idea for me in coming to understand oneself is that we are continually in change.
Yeah.
Right. And so we are a work in progress and an evolving book. I really want to explore some of the stuff that you've experienced, both for, the learnings and the rite of passage stuff, but also because I imagine this is some phenomenal stories, both that made the TV shows and maybe not. But where I want to actually start there is what what started this? You know, so clearly you had some learnings, like, man, there's some things here that we might be slipping. Was this something you've always kind of been this way, or was there something that went on for you? What, can you pinpoint
I
anything?
was working as a TV journalist for many years, and I think I always I never really felt man enough as I was growing up. I lived with my mum, through all of my teens and early childhood, and mum and dad had split up, and I think I'd always felt like something was missing. I didn't think I was tough enough. I didn't think that, did I really have it in me to get my hands dirty like other guys did? And was there an untapped inner strength within me that existed? I think I wanted to just sort of head out into the wild and see if I could return a new man. And in many ways that happened. So I went to 12 countries. I was working as a TV journalist, and I gave it all in, and I bought a heap of camera gear. And I decided to, go to the most remote places I could possibly find. I went to Siberia into -40 to live with reindeer herders in the Arctic Circle. And I went to Africa, and I landed upon this, once in a decade manhood ritual where you need to, live in the wild and get scarred across the chest. And then there was, I went and trained a wild golden eagle in Mongolia. And they were the first 3 adventures that I went on. And, there's a funny thing, like, in a way they were just big adventures, but I really did, in going out there and being frightened and being scared and combating fear, on every level. Like, there was the fear of the rituals themselves, but then there was the fear of, like, as a filmmaker, failing in front of everybody, and I was risking, my career, and I walked away from everything I knew. So there was no home for the show at that time. And I came back, and then Travel Channel in the US commissioned the series, and then I was just off for another almost 2 years, traveling the world into, crazy places. If there was cell phone reception, we hadn't gone far enough. They really were the most remote last bastions of isolated cultures in the world that still held their traditions true. And so we're talking, I participated in events like where, men would climb up into the tree canopies and have to hit a wasp nest and get stumbled over their body in order to be considered a man.
As you're saying this, I've seen the show, so like all the visions is coming to my mind at the same time. Yeah, this is a show, by the way. It's called Boy to Man, right?
Yeah, it's called Boy to Man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
Oh, look, I mean, just to give you a perspective, it was like learning how to ride and tame a bucking bronco, like, that was wild. And then, within a month, it would let me ride it in Venezuela. In Madagascar, they become men by riding on the back of zebu bulls, and, it's extraordinarily dangerous. What else? Like, there's like, the list goes on, So basically, I went to 12 different cultures and put myself through their initiations. And in the end, like, people would sort of joke and say, well, did you really feel like a man after the end of that? And the truth is, yes, I did. Like, what I discovered was that I didn't feel like, in this world at least, or just in myself, I had nothing to prove anymore. I didn't have, and the interesting thing about that was that it was all in my mind. Like, the perception of what made a man, I had all along. If I dropped the story of I wasn't a man in the first place.
Yeah.
So if I never had that perception and I never had that belief, I would never have had to go around the world and put myself through all these crazy rituals to discover that I was a man all along. So that was, I wish someone had told me I didn't have to do it before.
Yeah, but then I suppose that, knowing a little bit about what I know, but I suppose that's part of the process of an initiation into manhood.
Well,
is that something that you noticed?
Well, the interesting thing is, I mean, there's twofold, like two ideas here, because the first idea is that, you come up, you basically, people chase what they feel like they're missing in life, and stuff from childhood defines you for until you overcome it. So if I didn't feel like a man as a boy, like, it almost seeded my whole life to then go and chase, what it meant to be, what it meant to
12
be.
outrageous
Yeah.
adventures.
Until, of course, you feel like you've overcome that, then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing is in these tribal cultures, especially, there is a real distinct line between you being a teenager and entering manhood, or even being a child and entering manhood.
I suppose from the adolescence, right?
Yeah, and see, like women have it because everywhere, and interestingly, it's extraordinarily hard to find a female, in a tribe that does their initiations, because really it's getting a period and childbirth. So, and it happens to women like automatically, they get that.
There's a very real, unavoidable transition.
Yeah, and they all go through it, and that's what their initiation is. But for men, like, because then they're able to give birth, and like essentially they're women. For men, it's a lot different because we don't have that physical change. And so what all these cultures have done, have designed dividing line, like initiations where they'll take boys away from the village and they'll take them out into the bush and they'll put them through an ordeal where they think they're a goner. And even though, like, always invariably the ritual of what they're about to go through is not half as bad as what it is in their mind. That's the whole point, is that you go through a process where your younger self is challenged, you slay the demon, you think you're going to die, and you emerge a new man. And when you come back, often you're given a new name, and you're integrated back into the tribe, and everybody sees you differently because you've been through this process, and you feel different too. And so I went through this time and time and time.
Yeah, of course.
This is such a celebration and such a dividing line. You do feel different. It's quite incredible.
And did you find for you that, because, I suppose you were going in as a participant, but you're also going into those situations as a guest and as a filmmaker. Like, I'm assuming it must have changed your experience of the initiation, each one relative to the other participants, let's say. But did you feel like the community, essentially treated you as one of their own? And do you think that there was, I suppose, like a similar shift, even though you weren't technically part of the community?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, it's a funny thing, like we were living in these communities. One of my best mates came along with me, so I wasn't alone. So,
and roughly how long would you go for each place?
That's the thing. Like, they weren't short stays. Normally on a TV production, you might go for 10 days. That's a standard, like episodic shooting schedule. But because essentially I run solo with a mate, like, we can stay for much longer. So I was able to stay in all of these tribes sometimes 6 weeks. And that's a really decent amount of time to really get to know these people. And also, we're not living anywhere else. We're living in the huts with these people.
You're not going away at night, coming back.
We're migrating with them. We're helping. And because you're actively putting your hand up and saying, I want to learn about how you guys operate, and obviously it's not, you're not always accepted into an initiation rite. There's a process that they need to go through before the spirits can say yes in some instances. I remember in West Africa, there was a time when, in order to get accepted to do the initiation, they needed to ask some spirits. And that might seem far-fetched, but it's no more far-fetched than believing in Christianity or God, or anything like that. And
speaking to a power that's beyond the human form.
Yeah.
Suppose,
like, and I've seen some extraordinary things that I can't explain. But like, we were sitting in this mud hut, and they chopped the head off the chicken, and then the whole idea was, if the spirit said yes, this is how they made big executive decisions in this tribe. The chicken would if it was a yes, the chicken needed to find its way, flutter headless out of a window in the mud hut, and escape. And if it did that, then I was accepted. And so it did. Like, I mean, to me, it was just unbelievable. I just was speechless, and everybody was ecstatic. And they saw that as a sign that, yeah, he's okay. Like, let's go forward with this.
What were you experiencing in that moment leading up to that?
Oh, like panic, like because if I guess if the spirit had said no, or if the chicken,
Mm.
hadn't flown out the window, then it would have been game over, and I don't know what would have happened. I guess I would have had to go home without.
Yeah.
Uh,
Had you been at that place for some time
yeah,
already? Yeah.
yeah, weeks
Yeah.
already. So, and quite often, like the ordeals that you're going through take a long time too.
Mm.
There's a lot of
Mm.
preparation, and you're almost trying to achieve the impossible because, for example, like if you're going to train a golden eagle in Mongolia, uh, I mean, it's like you're doing the impossible. Same with trying to break in a horse,
Mm.
and so it will accept you on its back as a wild bucking
Yeah.
bronco.
So there's your process that you're going through, as you see it, almost like a death. It's where you got to believe you're a goner and you grow, etc.
Yeah.
But then there's these other unknowns: a wild eagle, a bucking bronco, whatever it may be.
Well, I think it's about surrendering to the process. It's surrendering to the universe. Like I don't want to sound crazy, but like on every one of our trips,
Mm.
um, there was it felt like we were being guided. Well, I was
Hmm.
being guided by something greater.
Hmm.
And like there were so many moments when I did something that was really risky. Like there was nothing, we're not talking about like having, there's no OHS out there. There is, there's
No,
no
you don't
smoking.
have to fill out a form and get someone to clear it before you do the things, right?
No, that's the whole thing, like it, and constantly taking risks and calculating
Yeah.
risks. If there's one thing that I became good at, it was that. It was like learning my limits and not doing something crazy without leading up to it and feeling right about doing it.
And was there a difference there between, or does it merge together with all of that in relation to the initiation processes, and then also you as a filmmaker capturing what you wanted to capture
Well,
for the show?
yeah, I mean, the line gets really blurred,
Yeah.
like, because, on one instance, like, I need to make a TV show, and, that can get cloudy because, it's not easy to try to experience something and be fully present while you're holding a camera on yourself. So,
Yeah.
like, sometimes I would throw that to a tribe member
Mm.
or my mate, or, like the people that I filmed with really became involved in the process of making
Mm.
the film because we didn't have a crew. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it was often like the tribe that you were living with became that TV crew and they loved it
Yeah.
because all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're there making
It's
a film.
cool.
And
I remember
also,
seeing some of the footage, right? And that you could see, how much they love getting involved in that part of it.
it's the most incredible bonding experience. So, when you go through something really tough with
Mm.
somebody else, like you set out to achieve, you climb a mountain or you start a new business, and you invariably go through some hurdles, and it's moments where you think you're never going to make it, and then you do, and then you bonded forever. Well, that happened. Like you make the best friends for life because you've all gone through this
Mm.
process of making a film together, and then when they see themselves every night and they see your passion and what you're trying to make and everything, then all of a sudden, where you thought, there might have been closed doors, they'll all open in front of you and everyone will come up with new ideas about what you could go through or revive ancient rituals or, show things to you that you might not ever have asked to see or experience. But I hope that answers your question about
Yeah,
being a
yeah. And
filmmaker.
so then, yeah, because obviously there's that part of being welcomed to the community and, as you said, like participating, being an active member of the community, and then also them buying into your part, what you're doing, creating the film, documenting them. But then I suppose, am I right in guessing, I can't remember the exact details, but a common element in all of the initiation and rites of passages was a group of adolescents going to
Yeah,
manhood?
mostly. Not all. I mean, mostly that's what happens because you
Yeah.
have like a big age group in a tribe that they'll group together and go through something together. But not, sometimes in other cultures it will be a father and a son
Yeah.
that
Okay.
go out and
Maybe that was the one in Siberia, was it?
yeah, there's one that's like true in Siberia where you have to be able to kill your own reindeer and eat the meat and drink like the warm blood raw on the ice.
Yes, that's right. I remember that
But
one.
also just surviving the cold out there and being able to herd animals and
Mm.
like it's so bitterly cold.
Yeah.
You can't even begin to describe like how tough you've got to be.
So did you find that there was a different level of kind of bonding with, I suppose your fellow participants, the fellow young men going through that process?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, I think, again, like when you go through something with somebody else or a group of people, um, like, yeah, you're bonded forever. Like, I mean, all of these people, nowhere that we went, except for bar a couple of locations, now don't have Facebook. Like,
Right.
I'm talking like the most remote places that you can ever imagine. Now, today, like 5 years on, Facebook's reached almost everywhere, and that's the point. Like we're reaching this tipping point where we're going to become some homogenized society where we don't have. We've lost all that information and those incredible rituals because
all that wisdom.
everybody wants to dump them and be, like Western, like how we live in the West. And, like for us, back here in the city, I think the lines of what it means to be a man are far more blurred. Like it's pretty basic when you go out into some of these places. The gender roles are really clearly defined, and yet I straddle these two worlds where I dip back and forth between tribal lands and wild places, and then the city. And and it's interesting to realize like where, like when you're in the city, like becoming a man might be going out and getting drunk for the first time, or like something lame like that, or getting a driver's license and finally becoming independent, or beating your dad at something.
Yeah.
And they're not as defining, so like, or becoming a dad, like that's obviously a huge moment.
For sure, but that's also because a lot of those other ones, not necessarily, but they seem more like just an age. And, clearly part of what we're talking about is there is an age element to it, but what it sounds more is a maturation process, right? So could you witness a difference in those other young men through their before, during, and after process?
I mean, it's hard to quantify. Like, all I can, I guess, go on is like, how did I feel?
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously a lot of the times I was a lot older than them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the guys that were going through these initiations were only 16 years old, but they grow up a lot faster in those environments, and there was some times when I couldn't even get the guts to go through with the initiation, and they could. But I definitely felt like when I went with that, like, all I can speak for is myself, and I definitely felt a shift. Like, I think it's just this immense feeling of pride of doing something that you never thought you'd have the strength to do. You combated fear in a way that, you never thought was possible. And I think fear dictates so much of our life. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about like wanting to go for that job promotion or giving your career to chase, your passion. That takes guts, like, and fears get in the way of so much of, and they block us so much of, our us being our real selves. Like, I mean, if there's one thing I guess I'm obsessed with is trying to like combat any fear that I have, or accept it and go, why am I feeling like that? Maybe this is something that I should make a film about, because it gives me an opportunity to dive deep and just like get over something, like.
Yeah, so there's a well, clearly an intense curiosity with your fear and that edge.
Well, like after I made Boy to Man, one of the other things, I really wanted to do was, I guess I was obsessed by that stage. After making Boy to Man, I really wanted to keep. I was like, well, what's the next life? What's life's next big rite of passage? And for me, it was like finding the right partner to be with and marry.
So you were single when you went through those experiences?
No, I was with my partner PJ, and I'd just gotten with her, and then my TV show was commissioned, and so I was traveling for like forever, and she kicked me out the door to go chase my dream. And so like I couldn't believe that someone would do that, because all of my girlfriends in the past had said, you know, why don't you grow up, and, you know, you should settle down, and like, in my mind, I think it was just
Do the cliche.
and like get a normal job and live in suburbia, and, you know, like, I guess, which is funny enough, like that's what I'm doing now. But
Yeah, but in the process there was growing up, like actually
well,
doing that, going away and doing some boy to man, some rite of passage
exactly.
rituals.
And something I needed to get out of my, like, I needed to get out of my system.
Yeah.
So yeah, I arrived back from making Boy to Man, and set about trying to convince my partner, like, maybe there's a way that we can be together and we can work together, and, you know, like, we can travel together, and hey, we can test our relationship at the same time. And she was really she's also very much into self-inquiry and self-discovery and challenging herself and perceptions and everything. So I think we didn't quite totally underestimated what we were about to go through. So we designed this sort of pre-marriage course where we would travel back to the tribes, some of which I'd already been to.
Yeah, okay, so you did visit some of the previous ones.
Yeah, and also, like, put our relationship through the ultimate test to see how we would fare, and what that would uncover. And I guess we expected it to be hard, but we didn't expect it to be, you know, bring us to breaking point. Like, so we were falls in love, and we headed off, having not really spent much time together, but being together for a long time, years. And man, oh man, like, it was like a baptism by fire. We just, you know, that was like transforming for me, like, I thought I had manned up to a point, but, like, on a whole nother level, like, above that, there was just this, PJ just brought out in me, like, all of these wide open, like, sort of just cut me open, and I just needed all these things I didn't realize I needed to learn. It was just, you were faced with having to get over, you know, perceptions and thoughts that you had, that you lived with all your life about yourself, just so you could be a better partner. So so it was about, for me, it was about becoming a partner, really. Like,
So there was this, you know, like intense period of boy to man, and then it was like man to partner and provider and
husband.
father and all that.
Yeah. And also, like, combating in my mind, like, what I thought marriage was, and for her, like, what we both thought it was, and breaking the fantasy of, like, having a relationship and expecting that everything's fine from then on. Like, because I think, you know, we're sold this furphy, like, with all of the TV shows that go on, of, you know, you put a ring on it and everything's okay. You know, live happily ever after, with no real preparation for what it actually takes to have a relationship, let alone have a baby. And so by us going through this extraordinary self-designed rite of passage, where we did all these rituals of love around the world, we ended up emerging from that so strong. And, like, having a baby is a walk in the park. I mean, not completely, but compared to what we went through, like, it was the best precursor for knowing our limits and knowing how to handle each other and getting over all these hang-ups that I think, if we hadn't done it, we would have walked into marriage totally ill-prepared, with an idea of, like, it's all supposed to be fun, without looking back inside and going, what do I need to get over to have? Because, I hope I'm not raving on here, but, like, the whole thing is, like, whatever you see, you get upset. Whatever you get upset about with another person is just a mirror of an inadequacy that you have in yourself. And so if you're getting upset and angry at someone, you know, especially, say for me, it's PJ, if that happens, then really it's my problem, because if I didn't react, if I had if I wasn't, like, subscribing to a story or another identity that I built up over years from my childhood often, and putting that onto her, then I wouldn't, you know, she'd just be someone getting angry if she was getting angry. I just wouldn't react. And I think,
Yeah, and you're kind of putting, what what I'm getting there
sense.
is you're without the exploration and the work, but in the moment, you're just making her responsible for some shit that is yours to
Well, nobody
take
can make
ownership of.
you feel like something. Like, you hear people all the time say, they making me feel like X. They're making me feel angry, or they're doing this to me. No one can ever do that to you. You do that to you by believing a thought that they're doing it to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like we, along the way on our extreme engagement, we had to combat things like commitment, jealousy, and like the fantasy of, like just letting each other be who we are without trying to change someone, you know.
So did you find that, because you went into this show, Extreme Engagement, and went into some pretty extreme and remote places, etc. again. So was it, you were actually going through some processes that the community and the village was taking you guys through, or simply just giving you some tests?
No, so I researched for a few months, and like, I mean, I've sort of got quite a bank of different knowledge of rituals around the world. Yeah, so it wasn't too hard to find positions that we could go in, like, or rituals that we could enter that would test a couple.
Yeah.
And
So that's what they're designed for, So you've got your rite of passage, boy to
Yeah.
man, and then they've also got something that's going to test a couple before they essentially bond together.
Yeah. And so that's what we sought out to do. And like, that might be doing a migration in Mongolia together and having to move animals and being responsible for essentially like their children across the most hostile plains you can ever imagine. It might be like, being able to sail together and build a canoe and survive on an island to feed a family. And like, these sound like pretty practical things, but what they bring up is all sorts of dilemmas when you start arguing on a canoe and it's sinking, in a blame game or whatever it is. Like, so it didn't matter so much what the rituals were that we were going through. It was more about like what surfaced for us in that moment. Like polygamous tribes in Nigeria where the women have two husbands, and I just didn't expect that to bring up jealousy in me. And like, off camera and stuff, I found myself getting jealous of all these guys coming around in Nigeria and just swooning over PJ. And then we were like, oh God, that's what this episode should be about. We didn't think it was going to be about that. That's what we needed to, or I needed to overcome.
Yeah.
Accept. And so, I'm like, it was a journey, and it was, and also making films themselves like pushed us to the brink as well, like off camera.
Of course, there's another element to it, right? And what I'm really getting in that, both in perhaps like in the moment of an intense experience, and in some process that you're going through, but also generally, it's like, what is this asking of me, and who do I need to be in this moment? Because what I'm also getting is, who do I need to be in this relationship? For myself, for her, for us.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And, like, that's an evolving question as well. Like, it's a constant, you're constantly discovering. I mean, PJ and I are far from perfect, but like, we work on it. I think it's, like, what's cool though about our relationship, I think, is that whenever if we start arguing, or we've got this alarm bell that goes off going, oh, well, what have we got to work on? Like, one of us or both of us have got a charge about something. Let's sit down and try to work out why we're getting frustrated, or, what is that deep-seated thought or belief that we need to overcome. But like, and that's a good thing, because you sort of want to grow. Like, that other person's there to help you to grow. Because if you're not uncovering something new and you're just staying stagnant, it's like kind of boring. Like, we're here to do that,
And so did you witness this stuff as well in couples in relationships when you're out in these places?
Yeah, I mean, life is a lot simpler in many ways, like for these couples, and the stuff that we can really take away. Like, marriage in some cultures is more of an exchange. It's more of a practical thing. Can we survive together?
Yeah.
Can we work together? Can we survive together? Will our families like each other? Will it work? Sometimes it's just, will our, it's just, sometimes it's arranged. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with arranged marriages, but
Did any of the places you went to have arranged marriages?
Yeah, some of them did.
And was there a different kind of dynamic in those tests?
Yeah, like
Because I suppose the point is still there, right? We need to test you guys regardless of how this has come about. Now you've got a job to do as a couple.
yeah. I mean, look, it was hard to actually experience what that would be like. Like when we were going to, when we were researching the show, like there was places where, like in South Korea, they're complete strangers married off in this moon festival every couple of years, and they've never seen each other before, and then they come together and then they're married. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, but we couldn't actually pretend to be going through that because we did know each other.
Of course,
and so we had to, I guess at that point, really, all you can do is just observe and go, are they happy? Are they not happy? What works about this? What doesn't work about that from our perspective? But sometimes it's hard, I guess, to have an opinion about whether or not arranged marriages.
Yes. And then do you feel like entering into that, I suppose, the relationship, but also this experiences that you went on with PJ, how do you think that was impacted by your previous experiences? Do you think you could have entered into that effectively, having not done those rites of passage?
I could have, I definitely could have, but I think what it gave me is I'd already put to bed any feelings of not feeling I guess masculine enough. I'd already overcome those hang-ups, I guess. So I've matured enough in that way. Again, I want to stress, you don't actually have to go through extreme things to overcome that. It's just that was my journey, and I went on this trip.
But also there are rites of passage for a very good bloody reason, right? Regardless of what the actual thing is, the idea and the steps, I suppose.
I think you can do it in lots of different ways. I mean, it's obviously hard to travel to go to some of these places now with COVID, but you can. I think anything that you do, where you set yourself something that taps into some of your biggest fears, and you go after that to see if you can, emerge from that, is good. And it can be soft. It doesn't always have to be an extreme adventure. It can be. You can just be going after that job that you've always wanted, or approaching someone that
what I'm getting there as well is there is potentially an identity shift of some capacity.
Yeah,
there's the newish. I was going to say new, but you're still the same person. There's this new version of you kind of emerged, the phoenix from the flames, so to speak. They just don't have to be real flames.
I don't but I'd say that it was, for me, it was totally real.
Yeah.
And for the guys that I was with going to initiations, I'm sure it was totally real for them too.
Yeah.
And I think
that's part of the role of the community, is it not, to kind of quote unquote make it as real as they can. Yeah. So the transformation is as real as it can be.
Yeah. So you're not duped of that transformation.
Yeah. And then, because you went through 12 of them.
Yeah.
So did the experience change after you'd done the first one and then the next one?
Yeah, that's a good point. How many times do you have to try to become a man? I think, certainly by the end, I really felt like I had nothing to prove. And I think the experience changed in the sense of, by the time I'd done a few of them, how did it change for me? Because that's a really good question. I think what never changed was making the actual film and the journey. So like they were always really hard. I think like I learned other things along the way, which was like, I touched on it before, but it's like I really noticed that every single time I'd go on one of these adventures, it would be for a finite period of time. So we would have 30 days, and I had to emerge from the tribe or the culture that I was living with, having achieved the impossible in my mind. Not only with the ritual, but we were taming wild animals, or doing crazy things that where you could kill yourself, or but making a film. And I'm coming away with a film and trusting in that experience. We didn't have a shooting script. Normally people go away and they've got everything planned out to a T. Well, this was like fully giving in, and a process of going, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I'm going to trust that the universe is going to show me, and the story will unfold naturally. And every single time it did. And so what that taught me was like every single time, even in the filmic sense, making the series, I didn't think that I'd be able to, come away with an episode, because for whatever reason, something would happen, or there'd be a disaster or stuff that you maybe don't see on screen, because it just takes too long to explain. But then by the time that, 6 weeks had finished, I would have walked away with this incredible film that like the most magical stuff would have happened. And the story would have unfolded in front of me. So I think I learned, after doing those manhood rituals, feeling like I didn't have so much to prove anymore, I learned to give into life. I learned to give into the process of...
You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show dedicated to helping everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, with your partners, and in your world. If you have got something from this podcast, please share it with someone that you think could benefit from it, and please visit your home for podcasts.
Yeah,
like us,
well, because what I'm also
to us,
hearing,
leave us a review.
For me, it's
your
something
feedback is phenomenal.
So aware of myself now, both in the work that I do, but also
until
because,
next time, I'm Mike Campbell,
much like you, I have a young child, and I'm isolated from my family. They all live in a different country, and so this idea of community, I just, the more I live, the more I reflect and learn, and also have a community of my own in terms of my business, the more I see the huge power in it and importance of it. And it sounds to me like in all of it, but maybe in those later ones as well, there was surrendering to the community. You get kind of received by the community, and then it's almost like a hive mind in some way that it's each individual is crucial to the community, so the community can kind of be. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, 100%. Like like when you enter a community that's remote or a tribe, you really have, especially when you cut off from any contact with the outside world, all you've got to go on is your human interaction. And so that becomes really important. And then you realize that everyone does have a vital role to play in the community, and for it all to be coming along nicely. And I think we're missing that a lot back in the city, and so we created in new ways. I mean, obviously you created by having your own community and giving back, and it's extraordinary. Like your path is just, you've done so well, and I guess I'm always searching for that. I miss it. I miss that connectivity with people in that way. And I hope that my young son can have that. Like the idea would be that when he's ready, would like to go back out into the wild and give him a sort of childhood that, like not many people would be prepared to try.
In terms of you guys living, just how you choose to live your lives.
Yeah.
And then what about the idea of an initiation, when he gets to the coming of age and a rite of passage? I'm guessing you've started to think about that in some capacity.
Yeah. Look, I guess it'd be totally up to him. So I'm just going to pass the ball there. Yeah, I don't know. As a dad, like, of course, especially as a new dad, look, I look at him and I don't want anything bad to happen to him. Certainly don't want him to have to try to be like me and try to test himself. Maybe we'll avoid all that and just skip that part of it. But maybe he will, and if he does, then I'll be there for him. And
Yeah.
like everything's kind of risk management, really, isn't it?
But then I suppose that
I mean, kids out
surely
there.
has to be part of the point, that you got to an age where you felt you hadn't received that or been gifted that, by the community and gone through it, and so you had to go and seek it out. But then if you were in a community that had it, you would go through it enveloped in that safety.
Yeah.
Right. So is it something that you leave for your son to potentially find, or you find a way of taking him through an appropriate rite of passage?
Well, I mean, that's my next initiation, really, because to let go of your child and let them go through something like that, and trust in that process is a whole other level of.
What do you think PJ would? How she would feel about that coming to
that
age?
She came back. She sort of went into our extreme engagement as a bit of a warrior. Sorry, as a city girl, and she emerged really as a warrior woman. And we both came back with these ideas of how we'd love to bring up our son Albie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is already, like, she started to have fears of him hurting himself or going out and being, like, as a mum, releasing him. And so immediately both of us are thinking, okay, we've got stuff to conquer again, so going out and traveling with him will be one of those, like, it would be one of those testing moments, letting go. And
was that something that you found in the cultures and places that you went to, that was there an obvious element, kind of in separation from mother and the father's part and so on?
Yeah. There's 100% where, like, there's a huge moment where because you're dependent on your mum for so long. But, like, to break away from that and be just around men, and it's a huge moment for a lot of guys, especially in these tribes. Like, real dividing line for them. And as a result, a lot of the young men are super, like, self-sufficient. Like, 9-year-olds can sail and survive and look after their extended family on their own. Like, it's incredible. Like, it's almost like in some places the kids are born with a machete in their mouths, ready to hunting and stuff. But it's a totally different upbringing, and I hope we can give a little bit of that to Albie.
Yeah. So then, looking at, let's just go to the rite of passage, from boy to man at the moment. What do you see as kind of like some takeaways, one or many if you want, for us, like as a society that don't live in these, old traditional communities? What can we do, or perhaps what do we need to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, like, the first thing that comes to mind is don't let your fear define you. Although I feel like fear suffocates us so much. Like, and especially if you're confused about, who you are as a man, go on a journey to find out. Like, I mean, you can even just go on a great trip to test yourself. That could be an amazing way. Even some of the overseas trips, like that people do as gap years, are incredible, because they leave and they have to fend for themselves and get a job overseas and then come back and you're really matured, and it's kind of essential sometimes. So I think another thing is, or some of the takeaways I've learned are fundamentally about having a perception or an idea of who you are, and realizing going on a journey to discover what they are, what you face in every day, and working through them, like and realizing that actually they're just fictitious thoughts that you've got in your mind, that are empty. And if you can find out ways of getting rid of them, and for me it was a physical thing, but it was also like really linked with fears. Facing my fears and realizing that they were all like a lot of the thoughts that defined me weren't real, was an amazing way to be free.
So it sounds like, there's a lot of fears anyway, but then when you're faced with a real thing, like this is a holy shit physical type challenge, there's a lot of the fear in the head. You go into it, it's potentially heightened, but then once you do the thing, all of that is now like a balloon that's just been popped.
Yeah,
because you've just shown yourself you can do the thing. Is that?
That's what it was for me, and that's I think could be, like replicated for a lot of guys. I mean, for a lot of I thought about for a long time designing some sort of, ritual like experiences where people could, come with me and go through and experience some of the transformations that I've had. But it's such a personal thing.
And that's where you definitely have to have the paperwork and the signatures.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. And so that all falls apart. But it's also such a personal thing, because depending on your background, how you grew up, is really what you feel like you might be missing. So like if you come from a really rich family and, full of successful career parents, your trajectory might be completely different. You might be feeling like, how do I stack up to my parents? How am I possibly going to, my dad, how am I possibly going to meet them where they're at? And then you might give up and you might turn rogue and go the opposite way. And this whole belief that you've got to measure up to your parents has been plaguing you through your whole life. And that might be your thing. And so how do you get rid of that? Well, I don't know. Like you have to go through that process and realize that you never had to be anyone that you thought that they wanted you to be in the first place. But that takes a journey to go through to find that. It doesn't just happen. I mean, you can do it with a counselor. You could do it with a really skilled person that can dig into thoughts with you. And we do that as well. Both PJ and I to combat our thoughts and mind, that sort of stuff. But
being guided is clearly, because you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were guided on some capacity through all of these processes, right?
Yeah. And being guided is an incredible thing to do too. Something like, I don't know, it's a really hard thing. You need the actual physical act of going on a journey to discover something about yourself. I think is really worthwhile.
And I think, the point there being it can certainly happen in many ways, but it is a journey. It is self-discovery. And what I'm also getting at the other side of that is like kind of arriving at yourself. Like, now here I am.
Yeah.
And that's part of that identity shift. The I used the word death earlier, the part of you that, you're saying goodbye to the boy, essentially, right?
Yeah. And the same goes on for like, becoming a husband and all the rest of it. Like when I went, people they're going to go through the journeys no matter what. You know what I mean? Like you're going to face, if you're in a marriage and you're not ready for that relationship, you're going to face, having a child is going to push every single button, and you're going to go through that journey no matter what. Do you know what I mean? You're not ready for that. You have differences. You're going to argue. You're going to have to force your way through it, and you're both going to have to reconcile.
Yeah.
You're going to face those challenges head on, and there's no real difference actually in having a baby as to going through, like, in my experience, as to like going on our extreme engagement with PJ. We went on a journey to find out more about ourselves. We did lots of different tests along the way, which pushed our buttons. But you know what? You don't know what buttons are going to be pushed. So like, it didn't really matter what the rituals were in that instance. It was what came up for us and how we got through it.
That was the container essentially, but you guys have got all the material that sits inside of it.
Yeah.
Very nice, mate. I'm looking at the time, and we're going to have to wrap this up. So I'm keen to know. This might be a pick your favorite child type situation, but thinking back to those rituals that you went through, can you share with us one moment that seemed like, you know, I don't know, am I going to get out of this? Can I do this? Like a kind of a make or break type. Blow our socks off. You were drinking warm blood straight from the heart of a reindeer type.
Well, like that kind of happened in every single boy to man initiation, and yeah, it's like picking your favorite child. I don't think there is a. I don't think I have a favorite experience because they were just all so profound, and that's like sounds like a cop out, but there was one moment that was extraordinarily real, like probably two on it when I made extreme engagement with PJ. And I think there was a lot more at stake there because not only were we doing rituals in remote environments, but we were living together 24/7. And my relationship was on the line, and I had so much, and also we were making a show for Netflix. So like there was so much at play. Like we couldn't come back without an episode. We couldn't break up, but we came really close to breaking up. Like there was one moment when we were sitting in the middle of the Amazon, and we were trying to go through this ritual where they take ayahuasca, which is a hallucinogenic jungle medicine, and yeah, you go on a drug trip really, and it was pushing every button known to man. Like I thought I was going to emerge a completely different person. I thought it was going to be. I was really scared of the experience before I did it. It was very transformative for me, but the lead up to it was frightening for PJ and I because she wasn't going to do it, and it was causing some friction between us. And just being out there, and we'd been traveling for seven months at that stage, and or longer, like 8 months, and we were in this, you know, like we were off camera. We were just like, how are we going to break up? Like, how do we physically break up? Let's do this. And 5 days from any, like on a boat from any part of from civilization, from the city. I'm sorry, 5 hours by boat, not 5 days. And it was just, there was no way out. So we had to move through it. And then the next place we went was Papua New Guinea. And yeah, like we were just, again, we were pushed to the brink where we were certain that was it, that was the end. And we were on this canoe together trying to catch a shark in the Solomon Sea, and I sunk the boat, and there were sharks in the water, and it was like PJ was screaming at me. And, but you know what? Like this is what I guess I'm trying to get at, is that it wasn't so much the ritual, but out of that was a very profound moment, because being pushed to the brink taught me like that this real crystallized for me this lesson about commitment. So the whole trip, the whole extreme engagement I've been preaching that PJ wasn't committed because she's told me that she didn't want to get married. And I really struggled with that. Like halfway through the engagement, she said she didn't want to get married. And so it sort of dawned on me in that moment in the water that, oh my God, like this girl has been through so much. Like she's sitting in shark-infested waters, like, you know, which is the one of like hundreds of different extreme situations. What more could I want, and what more commitment would I want? And in an instant, I came to realize that, oh, I've had this hang-up about commitment, and if I just give that away, like we're free. And so what does marriage mean? So I learned this really important lesson about commitment and marriage, and, you know, rather than having a hang-up that I did for so long about, you know, getting married and having
what it needs to be, what it can mean, all that kind of stuff.
So
yeah, it just took a wildly extreme experience to get there, but how beautiful.
Yeah. So
mate, thank you so much.
There's the lesson. Off you go to try to catch a shark.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll go for the metaphorical sharks. Thank you so much for that, and for sharing your stories and your experiences. Just, man, phenomenal. And I know it's not even scratching the surface. And to those listening, you've got to watch the show. So, mate, can you tell us briefly what the shows are? And I know they're in lots of places, but perhaps the summary of where people might be able to find them. And I'll make sure that we put the access on the website as well so people can find them.
So Boy to Man has been airing all over the world on a bunch of different channels. It's mainly found on Discovery Channel outside of Australia. And then I've got a list that I can send you for other more obscure countries, but for the bulk of them, it's mainly Discovery and BBC Knowledge here in Australia. I don't know if it's airing at the present, but I don't own the rights to that show, so it's hard to send links or anything like that.
Cool.
Extreme Engagement is on Netflix, and it's now streaming globally, so it's a one-stop shop.
Beautiful.
Fine.
Tim Noonan, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Thanks, Mike. Hope it's made sense.
Absolutely.
You have been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show designed to help everyday men build legendary relationships with yourself, with your partner, and your world. Wow, diving into extreme rites of passage, initiations. It's some interesting stuff, right? So if you want to learn more about Tim and his shows and what he does, then as we discussed on the end there, Extreme Engagement is on Netflix. If you go to my website, to the podcast page for this episode, we will have the best pieces of information and links that you can use to find his show, Boy to Man. I do strongly recommend watching it. It's a great show, as well as learning, not just in terms of entertainment, as well as learning about yourself potentially, but also the kinds of things that happen and that were traditional in initiation and rites of passage in the coming of age for young men, as well as, of course, in Extreme Engagement. The kinds of things that we get to not necessarily put ourselves through as couples, but have open conversations so we know who we are, what our limits are, what our agreements are, and who we want to be. And so as a final reminder, if you want to dive into this work for yourself, then jump onto my website. Better Partner Project is up for grabs. A punchy, powerful, comprehensive 4-week accelerator program in relationships for men to help you be your best, get on the same page, and build a true partnership. That is easy. And with that, that's our show for today. Click like, subscribe, please leave us a review. You know it rocks my world when you do that. I love seeing your little messages that you leave in there as well, maybe speaking to certain things that have really landed for you in the episode. And that is the show. We'll see you next time.